All right, we're coming off another victory in Israel. We just played the Israel select team, and let's see what the score was 107-71 for Auburn. So we've scored another 100 points again. We're 2 games in the 3-game tournament, one more, and we're an Israeli national champions, right? Right. And we have a special guest on, Joshua Halikman, who is known as the sports rabbi in Israel, and we have got him on, and Matt's on too, and we're going to learn a little bit about Israel, learn a little bit about Israel basketball, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot, guys. Matt and Jackson, a lot of fun to be here. Happy to join you today from the Holy Land.
Yeah, and I figured we'd start with just, tell us about yourself. Tell us about, you run a sports page. You seem to be the go-to, we asked around, you seem to be the go-to guy for Israeli sports.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Go-to guy is always good. I moved to Israel about 18 years ago from New York City. Grew up in Montreal, Canada. Spent a year in Israel my freshman year of college. Met my wife here. She was from New York, dragged me back to Yeshiva University. She went to the women's equivalent. We got married right after that in 1995. Stayed in the States for about 9 years or so. 2004, we moved here with 2 boys. And now we have 3 boys. One got married last year. Huge sports fan. I've been to about 4,000 live sporting events across my lifetime, which is crazy.
Wow.
I had season tickets in New York for the Knicks, the Rangers, Yankees, Jets, Liberty, St. John's, you name it. The City Hawks, which were the AFL team even. I was like day and night at Madison Square Garden, Yankee Stadium, Meadowlands, wherever. Came to Israel, made sure to continue that sports addiction as soon as I got here, pretty much. Took out season tickets to the local soccer and basketball team literally the second day I landed in the country. And I've been doing that ever since. I've been writing for the Jerusalem Post sports section since 2006. Had a internet sports radio station here back in 2009, 2010. And then started up my Sports Rabbi website back, I guess, in 2011. Which is expanded to, originally was just an English site. Now it's an English and Hebrew site. The Hebrew site solely focuses on Israeli basketball. We're probably the largest in content in the country, and probably 3rd largest basketball, hit-wise and stuff, which is very good on the Hebrew side. The English is more about the love of Israel through sports, even though I still love to have my own, analysis and fun stuff, and pretty cool stuff out there. So even just put up an article like literally seconds ago about Denny Avdia, who's going to be facing Auburn tomorrow. It's a pre-game talk with the coach and Denny Avdia about what they're, with the situation in Israel, and also the game coming up and their exhibition slate for the month before they head off to World Cup qualifiers, and then to the Eurobasket tournament in Prague, which the sports rabbi will be at for 10 days in the Czech Republic. So looking forward to that as well. Lots of fun, lots of stuff. There's tons of sports here. People don't realize there's just tons and tons and tons of sports. And the crazy thing is that you get to meet people here I would never meet in 3 million years if I lived still in New York City. If it's David Robinson, for example, or if it's Bruce Pearl or Auburn coming here, there's tons of celebrities. And leaving Democrat and Republican aside, the fact that Joe Biden was at the opening of the Maccabea Games, the president of the United States, is really something. I don't think the Maccabea organization could have asked for anything more than the president of the United States being at the opening ceremony. So it's a pretty cool place to live. Of course, we also have the challenges that you're all aware of right now with the rockets coming from Gaza. Hopefully that will settle very soon, but it's a blast to be here and it's a lot of fun.
I currently live in New York, and I have many Jewish friends, and I contacted them. I'm going to interview a rabbi. What should I say? And they say Shalom Aleichem. Is that right?
Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem.
Aleichem, and I'll say
all
back
right. We're getting cultured
on
this show here.
Very cultured. Where are you in New York?
Williamsburg.
So the city, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Plenty of Jewish
relate a little bit with
Williamsburg.
some of that stuff, even though I'm glad you had all those sports tickets because they are expensive.
now they are back between 1992 and I was at all those Knicks games and Ranger games in the mid 90s. They were not that expensive. I mean, now it's crazy. I mean, the tickets are nuts, but back then, thank God I could afford it, and it was a lot of fun. So I love it here.
That's awesome. I'm curious, what kind of familiarity was there before in your sports sphere of Bruce Pearl and his Jewish heritage, and because he really proudly wears that in the SEC and on the college basketball scene. How aware are people of that, and did that help? What's the scene been like over there for this trip?
Yeah, no, extremely aware of Bruce Pearl and of course his Jewish faith. The fact that he puts it all out there. He loves to put it all out there. I know at that press conference back in March when the Ukraine, and he talked about Purim. It was one of the holidays at that time. So we're very aware of that. That's something that we've known for years. We know his history, be it at Tennessee, and then of course being out of the game for a number of years, and coming back to Auburn, turning around the program. People that are basketball fans are in the know of that. The first two games that Auburn played, the first game there was probably about 1,000 people in a gym that seats 2,000, which is good. That's really good. Today it's a much smaller gym. There was probably maybe about 150, 200 people there. Tomorrow, I'm hearing there's going to be 3, 4, 5,000 people in a 10,000 seat arena. They only sold the bottom bowl, which seats about 5,000, so that was only on sale. My guess is they're going to load up that lower bowl with a ton of kids also from the south. They're going to probably bust them out of a lot of the southern communities that have been being pounded by Islamic Jihad to come to the game. I would expect that to happen. So, I would say tomorrow would be close to 5,000 fans. And I'll tell you this, Auburn's going to be in for quite the shocker tomorrow, because it's not going to be the same as the last two games. That's for sure.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit? We've been trying our best, and this is why we wanted to have you on. I've been contacting people trying to get some context on these teams. We went in really blind against that first team. This next one, even you said you didn't even know exactly who was going to play before the game. Now we have like the big one. This is the real test to the team. And I know there's like an NBA player, and I'm sure there's been some other players that have crossed over. Can you give us some people to look out for and what to expect?
Yeah. So they have a very senior roster playing in this game tomorrow. There are 4 players on the team that are not going to be playing. A number of them are also extremely senior. But those who are playing, Denny Avdia, who plays for the Washington Wizards, 9th overall draft pick back in 2020, he's going to be playing for the Israel national team. It was unclear a week ago if he was going to play or not. He came into camp a couple of days later, but it seems that he was. If you want to see all the quotes, go to sportsrabbi.com or go to Twitter at the Sports Rabbi. You'll see all the quotes out there in English. Click on the English tab if you go to the website. Danny will definitely play, and he's an NBA level player, 6'9", and he's a top-notch, solid talent.
What position he plays? Is he a power forward?
He's a power forward, small forward, but he can play the 1, he can play the 2, he can play the 5 even. He played point forward last year a bit for the Wizards, so. I would guess you're going to see him in the power forward position. I think they have enough small forwards. You won't see him there. So along with Denny Avdia, you have Yam Madar, who was also drafted that same year by the Boston Celtics in the second round. He plays for Partizan Belgrade. He's going to be starting his second season over there. They just moved up from the Euro Cup, which is the second best European competition, to the best, the Euro League. So that's where he's going to be playing this coming year. He and Denny, and Denny talks about this in the piece that I just put up. He has a special relationship with Yam. They've really grown together over the years, and they're really looking forward to playing with each other. Yam is a point guard. He's very stringy, he's like the type of guy in the cartoons that you'd like flatten and would pop right back up afterwards. So he's very wiry. He has no fear. You're going to see Yam Madar play. You'll see Noam Dovrat, who is an up-and-coming Israeli talent. He played on the under-20 team just now in Montenegro. He was also selected to the top 5 of that tournament. He has been an up-and-coming player. We all thought he would be drafted. He would have gone to the draft already, but he suffered a pretty bad elbow injury at the end of not this past season, but the season before, and it took him a long time to get back into the swing of things, but we all knew that this tournament was going to be something important for him, and it was. And he really, really showed that he could take the bull by the horns, and that was really good. He played in the league last year extremely well, second half once he changed teams. Then you have a lot of veteran players. You have Bar Timor, who's a 1-2. He can play the point, play the off guard. He plays for Apol Tel Aviv. He's been around the block for many years. Great shooter. I think he scored about 26 points in a playoff game against Maccabi Tel Aviv just a couple months ago. You have Guy Panini, who's almost 40 years old, and he's a three-point specialist. I don't think you're going to see much of him, but he is somebody to watch out from deep. Rafi Menko just signed by Maccabi Tel Aviv. He plays the three, good shooter. Tomer Ginat, important player, plays the power forward position as well, but could play the three. He played for Apol Tel Aviv, went to France for a couple of seasons, and now came back to Apol Tel Aviv to a hero's welcome. He decided to turn down the big money from Maccabi Tel Aviv and signed with his former team.
I know the system's different over there, but any of these guys, I know one guy is playing in the NBA, another got drafted. Have any played in college in America? I've we're trying to get context who is this playing,
So there's only one player that has played in college. Two players. One player won't play tomorrow. The captain of the team, Gal Meckel, has an injury, so he won't play. He's about 33 or 34 right now. He played at Wichita State, I believe, and that was years ago. Roman Sorkin played for Oregon, and Roman Sorkin is a very, very big up-and-coming player. He could be the second best Israeli player within a year or two, second to Deni Avdia. He plays the four in EuroLeague for Maccabi Tel Aviv, but he will probably play the five here for them. Another player, there's a ton of players. I mean, it's Idan Zalmanson is a big center. Gabi Chachashvili played with the Golden State Warriors Summer League team just now.
Oh, great.
He's a up-and-coming talent signed in Germany to play this coming year. Jake Cohen played for Davidson. So Jake Cohen is playing. He's played for Maccabi Tel Aviv on 3 different occasions, and is a veteran. He can play the 4 and 5, a good three-point shooter. Nimrod Levy play the 3-4, a good three-point shooter. This is going to be a totally different opera tomorrow. I mean, these guys have played with each other, and not only that, I mean, you guys are somewhat lucky. Tamir Blatt and Yovel Zusman, who would be 2 starters on this team, both play for Alba Berlin in the EuroLeague, just joined camp today, so they're not going to be available. One is a point guard. Tamir Blatt is David Blatt, who you may have heard of course, the former coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. David Blatt's son. Tamir is a point guard. He had a great season, and Yovel Zusman is a great. He can play the 2, he can play the 3. Also a star player when he was with the under-20 team. Had been looked at a long time by the Cleveland Cavaliers. They had looked at him. He played for the Summer League team a couple of years ago as well. So it's a team with a lot of experience, a couple of youngsters, but
is there a certain playing style they have? We're not used to playing these international teams. I think in the U20, some of the announcers were saying, "Oh, it's very 3-point heavy." Is this team going to be very center power forward heavy, very slow, or very 3-point, very transition?
Very half-court offense centered team, though they'll run. And I think that's what Avdia brings to the table, is the quickness. And that's something that the coach Guy Goodis mentions in the article that I just put out. He talks about how Avdia comes into the camp, and brings a whole set of tools that the typical Israeli player doesn't have. If it's the intensity of it practice, and that's not to say the players aren't intense, but there again is a different level of training in the NBA. The same thing with his quickness, and you'll see him lead the break. You'll see him take the ball occasionally. There'll be a lot of half-court sets. You'll see a lot of 3-point shooting. I'll just say this: the first team that the Auburn Tigers played against was the Maccabiah team that played against Lior Berman, to give you an idea. And that was a very, very young team, 17, 18, and 19-year-olds. It wasn't even a U20 team. And these were like the second best players that, got cut from the under-20 or under-18 team that just played in European championships as well. So they really had no choice, and they had no size. I mean, literally, they had no size. The real under-20 team has Gilad Levy, 7'1" center, that Dovrat would feed the ball into, and he can just, stand into the basket and dunk. And, defensively, he changes things up. So, it was a very, very soft opponent for Auburn. This game that they just played now was against this Israel Select team against, I mean, honestly, you're talking about some players that are playing in the second division. You know, Chris Smith
So we
had a
saw at
couple.
least one guy that was played for Louisville. They showed on the TV.
Yeah,
I don't know
Chris
if there's
Smith.
any other.
Chris Smith, J.R. Smith's brother. So Chris Smith has been playing in Israel for a number of years. Good friend, good man. But again, he plays in the second division. Nothing to take away from him, but he's a second division player. This team is loaded with second division players. The one player that did really stand out on the Israel side, or two players, Tony Mitchell, played in Israel a number of years ago. He's probably here in Israel looking for a gig, and maybe he was on vacation, and that's how they got him to come on the team. Not really sure otherwise. He had a good game, so that definitely probably piqued the interest of some teams that were looking for a player.
Was he a former USA player, like somebody from the US, Tony Mitchell?
Yeah, he played in college. I think Texas, North Texas, maybe.
Texas.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other player was Shachar Amir, and he's an interesting player, young kid. He had a ton of points. I don't know what he finished with, but I know at one point he had 14 during the course of the game. He was never ticketed to be a good player. He made the under-20 team back in 2019 that won the European Championship with Deni Avdia and Yamadar with all the stars. Shachamir didn't even play. He was like an afterthought on this team. And then he started playing in, second division. Last season, he had a breakout year, turned a ton of heads, which earned him a contract with the league champions, Apollo Cholon. So, and he showed really today why he earned that contract. And that's really good. I mean, if I was looking at one really, really big highlight in the game for this Israel select team of guys that were just cobbled together at the last minute, Shachar Amir is the man. I mean, he really, really showed today that he could play in, against top talent and also not be afraid and take some good shots. So that was really solid from this game. But tomorrow, it's going to be a totally different game.
I've got one more question that I'll get in before I let Matt. I keep cutting Matt off over here. We try to go back and forth, but online, you mentioned to me via email that you've been fasting for Jewish cultural reasons, and so has some of these players, I believe. And there's some comments online. They were like, "Oh, we're playing these teams been fasting. Is it really going to hurt their performance?" I don't know if you want to speak to. We're playing the Olympic team, but they're fasting. Maybe we get a little edge on them.
I don't think many of those players are fasting.
Okay. And what's the reason for the fasting? I don't think any of them.
So actually, it's the saddest solemn day. People say Yom Kippur is the saddest and solemn day. It's really not true. Yom Kippur is actually a happy day, even though people fast and it's solemn and it's serious. But that's the day when God seals our fate in the book of life for that's Yom Kippur, and we're usually, I look at that as a happy holiday. I lead the services at a lot of different synagogues, and I so much enjoy leading the services on the day, fasting and just going all out, because it's a chance to show God that we're worth living for. We're worth it for another year. Today is really the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. It's the 9th day of Av, which commemorates the destruction of the two temples that were on the temple. You're talking about the Temple Mount, which I mentioned earlier. The temples stood on where the Dome of the Rock is today. That's where the temples were for, last time was about 2,000 years ago. So it commemorates the destruction of those. It also commemorates all the difficulties and difficult moments. It could be the Spanish Inquisition of 1492. Most recently, of course, the Holocaust is in that, even though there are separate Holocaust days. It is observed also, so it's a very serious, sad day. There's a lot of different restrictions as well, but
and you fast during the day for this?
25 hours. It started last night at around 7:30, and it ended around 8 o'clock today. So 8 o'clock tonight. So it's also 20.
You fast again tomorrow?
No, we're done.
Okay, so this select team is the team we got with the fast, but
I don't think they fasted. I don't think.
Okay, all right, if you say so. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people in the country, a lot of businesses weren't open. The 9 days leading up to this day is something that people take very cautiously. People don't go into business transactions. Just they look at it as bad omens. So people people, I hadn't shaved. I just literally made sure to shave before we got on this podcast. So
You just broke your fast like in the last hour or two, right?
yeah, basically, yeah. And so right after I ate, I shaved because I wanted to look proper to come on this podcast.
We
and look like
appreciate it. Yeah.
you know, so I wanted to make sure I was all up and up. But there's a lot of restriction. For example, we haven't had any meat over the last 9 days, like no meat products. So, tonight we could have, we didn't, but tomorrow, don't worry, we'll be going out for some nice big dinner before the Auburn game that I can tell you.
Good.
I told the boys, I told my staff, the boys, that we're going out for a nice dinner at the arena before the game. So,
All right. Yeah.
Can you give us a little idea? You mentioned the pro league and some of the teams locally. Can you give kind of our listeners an idea of where Israeli basketball kind of sits among, all these leagues outside of the NBA? We know basketball is growing internationally, and it's, really growing like crazy in a lot of places, and we're seeing more and more players come from all over. Can you give us an idea of what that looks like in Israel?
So Bruce said it's the second best league outside of the NBA. So I wouldn't say it's the second best league, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely one of the best leagues. It's an entertaining league. It's closer to the G League in a lot of aspects, the Israeli league. And I'm not talking about the European league, which is totally different. That's a whole other educational process, which I'll get into a little bit. But the Israeli league is a fun, quick, guard-paced game, lots of three-point shooting. It's not dominated by big men. Like, you can have players playing multiple positions. If you look at a league like Germany or France, and I'll talk to some of the players that came back, the Israelis that came back to play back in Israel. They'll say, like, in France, a 5 is a 5, a 4 is a 4, and a 3 is a 3. In Israel, you can have a 3 that's a 5, a 4 that's a 2, and a 1 that's a 5 on occasion. It's all over the map, but it's entertaining basketball. It's a lot of fun. There's 12 teams in the top league, and that spans from all the way up north to all the way, to the Nahariya area, which is now they're in the Lumit League. I guess the most northern team is probably either Kiryat Ata, which is a brand new team in the league. They've never been in the top league before. They earned promotion. So that's a little bit of a difference between the NBA, right? And Galil Elyon, which is also up in the north by the Galilee, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I know that, Bruce and the team spent some time on the Sea of the Galilee as well. And all the way down south to Eilat, which is the Las Vegas, even though there's no gambling or no casinos, but the Las Vegas of Israel, to say. So, you have 12 teams that span the whole country. And it's a good league. Would I say the French league is better? I'm not so sure. People would say, yeah, the French league's better. Is the German league better? People would say yes. I'm not so sure. Spanish league is definitely better. The Spanish league, Barcelona, Real Madrid, that's the cream of the crop.
I know EuroLeague has like kind of their example of like the UEFA Champions League, all these different leagues get together for a championship kind of. You kind of compare the leagues that way. Does Israel get in on that? You guys play those?
So the EuroLeague, and that's what I was going to get to a little bit. The EuroLeague is the top European league, and really the second best league after the NBA. And there you're looking at NBA playoff style basketball every single game. You're talking about tight defenses. You have centers that really play the center position, not so much anymore in the NBA. But you really, really you look back to the 90s basketball, it's a lot of 90s basketball, even though the sharpshooting from the outside is more of the Curry style game. So it's a mix of the modern NBA still back to the 90s NBA. And you have the best teams. Maccabi Tel Aviv is the 6-time European champion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's a powerhouse. Yeah. Maccabi Tel Aviv is one of the most important teams in European basketball history.
And for those that aren't geographically strong, Israel is not in Europe, but it does play a lot of sports in Europe, right?
Yes.
Soccer too, and a couple different things they play in the European leagues. Just fits better culturally, right?
Well, it comes back. If you ever want me to do a presentation on the whole history of Israeli sports, just call me up. I'll do it for you.
There's a burgeoning friendship between Israel and Auburn right now. Yeah,
I've done it for 10,000 people, this presentation. So it's but it really stems. Israel's in Asia, right? I mean, some people would say it's in Africa. I mean, it really comes down to the boycotts in the 60s where Muslim countries refused to play Israeli teams or the Israel national team. That's where it really came down to. and Israel was kind of a nomad for a number of years. Also, Iran, for example, before the Ayatollah came to power, when it was the Shah, Israel used to play in Iran into the mid 70s. That was normal. Israel and Iran had an excellent relationship. Israel was in Iran, Iran was here. There was no issues till the late 70s and the oncoming of the Iranian regime that exists now. So, that was part and parcel why we had to move to Europe. Though in basketball, Israel was always part of the European basketball scene. And soccer, that's kind of why they moved. But Israel's always been part of Europe, even since the 60s in the basketball realm. So Maccabi Tel Aviv is this big powerhouse. They last won the European Championship in 2014. The other European competitions, Euro Cup, which Hapoel Tel Aviv will be playing in, that's the second best competition, even though Hapoel Tel Aviv would not be considered the second best team in Israel. And even Maccabi Tel Aviv didn't win the championship. They didn't even play in the championship this past year.
Oh, we know about teams that don't play in championships but get to move on to better things. It's a whole thing in our fan base.
So you also have the Basketball Champions League, which Hapoel Jerusalem and Hapoel Cologne play in. And then last but not least, the FIBA Europe Cup. So you have about 7 Israeli teams out of the 12 that are playing in European competitions, which is a lot, because otherwise they'd only be playing once a week. The schedule's totally not very un-NBA like. Maccabi Tel Aviv will play around 80 games during the course of the season,
Wow.
but a team that's not playing in Europe may play 26, 30 games, and that's it. So it's kind of difficult with them.
We kind of have this system down in our head in America of high schoolers and AAU, if you know what that is, where these are like the best talents kind of get together at the AAU
Sure.
and they play for their high schools. And if you're really good, you play in college, and 2% of college basketball players or something make it to the NBA. I know it's different in Israel, it's different in Europe. They don't have the same high school, college, pro kind of pipeline. They have these developmental leagues, and these big teams will have smaller, like junior varsity style. Can you explain kind of the system in Israel? And then can you explain if there's any, how can an Israeli player, how do you identify a great young talent and get them to America? Could Auburn theoretically be talked into recruiting an Israeli player, and how would that look?
So that's a great question. And there's a number of ways that Israeli players end up moving up that ladder. Usually what happens is our players are part of a club. So they may be in the Maccabi Tel Aviv youth system. Now they play in the youth team, and the better players obviously move up as the years go on. Not only do they play in their youth team, which could be Maccabi Tel Aviv or Hapoel Tel Aviv, or even a team like Emek Hefer, which is just youth teams. It doesn't have a top league team. They also, these kids play for their high school teams as well. So the better players are in high schools that specifically, we'll say, are geared for basketball. There are a number of those across the country, from the middle of the country to the north, that have specific high schools that the better players are going to be playing with. So you have those two routes. Then these players are playing usually on youth national teams, so they can start out in under 16, and they're already being scouted. So, for example, the under 16 team for Israel is going off to a tournament, I think in Macedonia, coming up at the end of this week. I think it's in Macedonia. So there'll be scouts all over that tournament. The under 18 tournament that just took place, tons of scouts around that.
What kind of scouts are they? The European teams like Real Madrid and them, or is there college scouts?
NBA and college and European.
Do you feel like these Israeli kids that are maybe NBA prospects, maybe Real Madrid prospects, do you think college coaches are giving them enough attention? Do you think they want to even go to a college? Does that even make sense in their brain when they could theoretically go pro immediately in Europe somewhere?
So one of the sticking points is the Army, because when you're 18 years old, you have to go to the Army. And that kind of stunts a lot of players' development. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to the front lines. They can get a desk job. But for example, Gilad Levy is 18 years old. He was playing in Madrid for Estudiantes, which is another team that exists near Real Madrid. But they have a specialty in dealing with big men. Because he was so big, he was training for the last 3 years with specific coaches. Now, he had to come back to Israel because, or at least the government hasn't granted him, or the army hasn't granted him an exceptional player status, which Denny Avdia, for example, was granted. That's how he played. That's how he was allowed to play in the NBA. Right
Is there
before,
a lot of players that do that. You literally have to make the NBA usually. Or?
usually you have to be at the top of the top. It's not easy to, or you can defer sometimes, but it's difficult. It's difficult to get the army to defer. Should they be so strict? That's an open debate.
If a player was great and Bruce Pearl saw him in Israel and offered him a scholarship, would they be able to defer and say, "I'm going to college in America for this," or is that not even worth it? Like,
potentially.
Yeah. But it's
But
just an obstacle, I guess.
It's an obstacle, but I don't think anybody that he's going to see on this trip are going to be up to that up to that level.
I always am so interested when they take these trips and things that there's these untapped talents, and you find a kid like Luka Doncic goes over to Europe and comes over, and you realize how great he is, and you just wonder if a college coach had seen him a couple years before,
So we knew, like Luka Doncic, we'd been following since he was a kid, a young teenager. We knew. I met him when he was like a nothing for Real Madrid, just on the roster. Denny Avdia, I was hanging out with him when he was like 15, 16 years old. And, now he's playing in the NBA. He's a good kid. It's just so interesting to see how they move on. In most cases, if you're really that good, you're going to skip college. There are players that will go to mostly second or third division schools, but they've already been past the army, meaning that they're 21 or 22, they're older, they're looking to go get an education at this point, and they want to play basketball still, but those aren't the cream of the crop basketball players. So it's very few. Right now, I'd say the big talent that we saw over the last month is Noam Yaakov. Now, Noam Yaakov plays for the under-18 team. He went this past year to play in France for a team called Asvel Villebron, which is owned by Tony Parker. He's a point guard also. And he had definitely a very good year. He was one of the stars of this under-18 tournament. He should, even though the team finished in 8th place, which is good, because it's very, very tough competition in the under-18, and that was he was by far the best player on that team. And he averaged about 20 points a game, which is very difficult at this level. When you're playing 40 minutes under-18 European against the top Spanish prospects, the top Serbian prospects, the top French prospects. You have to understand, these are where the top prospects, the under-20 tournament, for example, already the top prospects are gone. They're already either, in the NBA, or they're playing, maybe some of them are in college. Yohan Traore, right?
There you go, yeah.
Well, there's a top talent, right? He's from France, so he decided to go the college route. You guys picked up a great player, over 20 points each game.
Yeah, so I guess the obstacle for Israel is the army usually. But somebody like Johan made the decision, and he left a year early, I believe, and played in high school for a senior year in America, and then decided to go to college. It seems like there's the biggest barrier to that is that these kids don't mind playing a year or two in Europe, and the idea of a high school player in America going to play in Europe for a year or two before they come back for the NBA. In their head, I think they would think, no, my career's over by the time I go to Europe,
like Brandon Jennings back in the day. If you remember the name Brandon Jennings, he played for the Milwaukee Bucks. He floated around. He made a big move, right? He skipped college and he went to Rome. He went to play for Roma. I remember that, and that to me was just fascinating to watch. Even LaMelo, right? He went to play in Lithuania, but that was a joke, anyways. He wasn't playing for a good team.
We've had a couple going to like New Zealand too, and the G League has stepped up a bit in different ways, and it looks like they might drop the one and done rule and things. It's very interesting. A completely different system than the U.S.
Yeah,
maybe better, maybe worse. I don't know. Yeah.
Totally different. No, I hear you. So it's possible that a player will go. Like Roman Sorkin played for Oregon a number of years back. He was on the roster. He played a few minutes. He didn't play much, but it was definitely indicated that he was a talented player. And we're seeing that talent now at the age of 24, 25 really coming to fruition. Because he's had the time now to develop. He was stuck doing guard duty at some location in the north and here and that. He used to tell me these horrible stories about, he'd have to go, he'd be half asleep going to practice for his old team, Maccabi Haifa. So it's a totally different way of life here. Totally different.
You know what could be a good comparison to figure out that we're trying our very best to try to figure out how good the competition we are playing. You've met Lior Berman, you covered Lior Berman with the Maccabee team.
Mhm.
This U20 team, this select team, and this Olympic team. Could he have played for any of those teams? Because we know how good Lior is.
Yeah,
We know where he
okay.
fits on the team.
Yes, Lior Berman
Yeah.
would have been the star. He was the star of the Maccabee team.
Great.
To give you an idea, he was
And
the
he would
star.
have been the star of the U20 team too, you think?
He would have been the under 20 team that the team that played against Auburn. Yes.
Okay, great.
The under
That's good to
20
know.
team.
Yeah.
The under 20 team that played in the European Championships. He would have been one of the better players.
Okay. And what about this select team? Do you think he would have
He would have been
started
the
on
best
the select
player.
team?
He would have been the best player on the select team.
Do you think the select team is? Do you think the U20 team we played is better than the select team we just played?
No, I
Okay.
wouldn't say that, but I would say Lior Berman would be. I think he would be the top player on both the U20 team and this team.
Okay, that's
Even-
great to know.
that's-
And then
That's the way I would see it. I mean, I think Lior Berman has, if he wants to play professional basketball in Israel when his time in Auburn's over, he will have a number of teams handing him a contract
and do you think
without
if
a
he,
question.
do you think he would play on this Olympic team on Monday if he was Israeli? Do you think he would be a starter, a role player, play it all? Yeah.
That's a good question. He doesn't have the experience. Again, this select team was guys
It's
cobbled
just from
together.
I guess just from like a talent level, do you think he would be able to play on this Olympic team if he practiced with them? Like this one we're playing on Monday.
Yes,
Okay.
certainly. Yes,
Yeah.
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't see- I
I
don't
think
see
that's
any-
the best context we've gotten for the talent
Yeah.
levels,
I don't see any reason not. For example, Spencer Weiss, who was the played on the Maccabee team in 2017 under Doug Gottlieb. He ended up he's playing in Israel now. Spencer Weiss was the Ivy League Player of the Year back in 2017. He has been on the Israel national team. He has played on junior Israel national teams as well. I would say this: he hasn't had a successful run with the national team. He's played a few games. Why? Primarily because he's a three-point shooter. Lior Berman does a lot more than shoot three-pointers. That's what I think.
For us, he's a three-point shooter.
Yeah, but
interesting
for the Maccabee team, he was slashing to the basket. He was distributing the ball. He was taking three-pointers. He was grabbing rebounds. He was, in my opinion, the best. Again, the best player on that Maccabee team, which was all college players. So. It was interesting when I was talking to some of the Israel Maccabee players right after they won the bronze medal game. I said, they told me, we're playing against Auburn next week. And I said, you realize that Lior Berman, who is, not one of the best probably one of the guys that is a very role player, limited player for Auburn, was the best player on the Maccabee team. He says, oh, yes, we realize that. So they knew going into the game what the situation was going to be. So
that's great. I think that's by far, I don't know, Matt, if you agree, I think that's by far the best context we've gotten for the talent levels and things. We love Lior. We really hate he's missed out on this piece of the trip because this was like built for him, way through the year. You find out. We good to go again?
Yeah, I'm going to try something. Let's try to pick up where we were. If we
All right, sorry, we had a little mishap in there in the recording, but we're still talking about Lior Berman. He's 24 years old. He played great on the Maccabee USA team. You just said, Josh, that you think he would be able to play professionally in Israel.
Yeah, definitely could play professionally in Israel. I am sure. I know for sure there were lots of people watching him. That I can tell you. I know for sure. I can't tell you the likes. Maybe off air I can tell you, but there were definitely people of interest watching him every game because
how much we talked to a couple players now that played overseas, and there's a kind of back and forth of how much these guys make and what kind of lifestyle they can live. And KT Harrell played in Turkey. We have a guy named Horst Spencer playing in France, and they seem to do pretty well. But is there like a average salary? Is there like a big time? Like what is it like to live that life? So
it's a good question. The stars make $1 million a year.
Okay.
that's the big money. If you hit the million mark, you make say $750,000, you're up there.
That's in a year.
$800,000. Yeah, in a year.
Wow. Okay. Well, then you're living good. I think we'd all drop whatever we're doing for that. So
yeah. So those are good contracts. Primarily though, Israeli teams are paying somewhere between 80,000 to around 250. That's not the top teams like Maccabi Tel Aviv, who are paying much more because they're also, like I mentioned before, they have to fill the roster with higher level players, EuroLeague level players, because they have to compete in both the competitions, and you're gonna pay a premium for that. They also have a bigger arena, they have a bigger budget, so forth and so on. But your typical Israeli team is going to pay somewhere $75,000-$80,000 to about $250,000 for the better players. Division III player like John DiBartolomeo played for Maccabi Tel Aviv. He was earning almost about $300,000 roughly, and had a 3-year deal, 3 times 3. That's it's pretty good money.
We see the kids, there's people on our team who already know, or just they're not going to go pro, but they're good at basketball and they're better than Lior. There's people like maybe a Cardwell or Chris Moore or some of these players. And do you think they could come play over there? And
so Cardwell's been scouted both of these games.
Wow.
Again,
who's getting scouted? Tell us the scouting stuff. This is very interesting to me.
So I know he was getting scouted. There were people at both of these games. I spoke to a couple of them. They really like him. They like his energy. He's a good guy. He's a good size. He would fit perfectly into the Israeli game because of the way he plays, slashing to the basket, very athletic. He's a big, so he can play the 4-5 if you need 4-5 easily. If he can get that 3-point shot, we saw him airball one from the corner, that would make him even more valuable, right? So a team like a EuroLeague team, they'd see his 3-point shot and say, well, hold on, we need a guy that can hit the corner 3. But a typical Israeli team will say, yeah, I want this guy on my team. Dylan Cardwell, and also Bruce has been pumping him and Lior the entire trip that they should be playing in Israel when their careers college careers are done. So that's been, that's on public record. He said it, on the record. So I think
we've had Cardwell on the podcast before. We think that he could have a great career in the WWE in wrestling, but he is not interested. So maybe we'll be watching him in Israeli basketball. Be really entertaining to see Lior and Cardwell out there playing for Maccabi or whoever.
You think Cardwell also, he's gotten a lot out of this trip. I mean, from a religious, spiritual standpoint as well. I think that he's just been blown away by the opportunities that he's had, whether it's to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Mount of Olives, the Sea of the Galilee, to be baptized in the Jordan River, all those different things. I think that you could see on social media, and I was with him, not at all those things, but at a couple of events with him, and I asked him about that, and he's just smiling. It seems he's coming out of this shell. If you look, I know what his stats were the first 2 seasons, but you're seeing this guy now at least come out of a shell. Really, translate that to when the season really starts for you guys, that I don't know, but he's definitely. I spoke to a good friend of mine who's he came to that game last week to specifically watch him play. So that's a good sign. That's a good sign.
Good professional development from our head coach here.
Yeah. That's good. Listen, it's good to have a coach that's going to stick up for his players and try to get them placed afterwards. Doug Gottlieb did that with the Maccabi team in 2017, and he had, I think, 7 of his 12 players playing professionally in Israel right after the Maccabi. That is amazing. If you think about that, 7 players from that team played in the first and second division. I think it was 6 in the first and 1 in the second, which is really amazing. And that was him basically speaking to all the teams and talking to the coaches and making sure there were scouts at the games and, that they saw them play. This year's Maccabi team was a little different. They were much younger. There was nobody, only one player had graduated. So it was a different type of situation than in 2017.
Well, if we're talking about Maccabi professional development, we had the head coach of the Florida Gators. His name's Al Golden, right? Or is that a different guy?
Todd Golden.
Todd Golden, and he was on Bruce Pearl's Maccabee team. He came over 10 years ago or more than that even. Now he's the head coach of the Florida Gators, and they're doing this birthright foreign tour kind of thing.
Right.
I was going to ask your opinions on Bruce from your article, man. Bruce is after reading your article about it, I know he wanted to push this. I know this was partially his idea, if not his entire idea. It sounds like he wants to be the CEO and make this a huge event. He wants several teams coming. He wants big thing. And I just curious, who else do you think would be interested? I know the Florida guy is probably interested.
Yeah. I mean, he said he wants 2 to 4 teams. I think it would be a huge success if he got 1 team per year to come on a trip like this. It's not easy. It's very expensive. It's much more expensive than anywhere else. They stayed at a very, very 5+ star hotel in Jerusalem. I am not 100% sure where they're staying in Tel Aviv, but I know where they were in Jerusalem. So, it's not a cheap endeavor. I mean, you also have ESPN there and Jay Billis, which, he's the top guy. ESPN came over and partnered with them, and Roxy Bernstein coming back to Israel is great. I had him on my podcast last week. It's difficult. I saw Duke play in Montreal because that's where originally I'm from, and I was up visiting my family, and Mike Krzyzewski took Duke on a Canadian tour. Well, that's a hell of a lot cheaper to do that than to go to A, Europe, or even B, the Middle East and Israel. But again, I think it's really Bruce. The fact that he felt so strongly because of his feelings about the land of Israel, the state of Israel, the holiness of this country, and his personal connection. That's really what made this trip happen. And if he didn't push the way he pushed, the trip doesn't happen. Yes, he has partners in a lot of different places, but what I think he's showing, and what ESPN is doing and the SEC network, they're building a file of incredible scenes, incredible video clips, and he can now take this to a Notre Dame or to a Florida or to Louisville or Kentucky and say, hey, forget about the Jewish side about the trip. This is a cultural experience and a religious experience that many of these guys would have never had and will never have do this trip. You're going to learn a lot about your players. And I think that speaks of, a lot. I mean, the amount of Jewish players in college basketball is minimal at best. But when you look at the Christian aspect of it, it's amazing. I mean, the fact that you can go to these places and visit, just as Dylan Cardwell spoke about it and many of the other players. And, you're going to have fun too. It's not just the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Mount of Olives. It's going to, float in the Dead Sea. It's going up to, I don't know if they did Masada or not, but going to the Sea of the Galilee, spending great time in Tel Aviv, and just, you're seeing something, for an Israel standpoint of public relations, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. For us, this is show the world that, hey, this is not, even though, quote unquote, this is not a war zone, there's no apartheid going on here. Yes, we have the conflicts, but listen, our neighbors are Arabs, Muslims, Christians. We live amongst everybody. It's, it's the radicals that unfortunately earn all the headlines.
What can you tell me about, you mentioned it in your article, and I've been starting to hear this name and this company, Complete Sports Management, and Leah Miller, I believe they even announced, I think they even said her name on the broadcast today. And I saw,
sure they did.
Yeah. Can you tell us about that, about her, about this company? It seems to be the go-to place for these foreign tours. And I think these foreign tours are so interesting. Yeah. It's such a great thing for these kids. It's such a great thing for the sport itself. I want to see more. I want to see more broadcasted. I want to go to a game. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to Lee a couple of occasions on this trip already.
Is it Lee or Leah?
Lee. I think Lee. The way they're pronouncing it is Lee. I thought it was Leah, but it's Lee. It's a lady.
It's a lady. Okay, because there was 2 ones on the internet I found. I couldn't tell which was which.
So Complete Sports Management, they've done it. They've done these tours for every college team, it seems. I mean, and I went through their portfolio. I mean, pictures and just so much activity. I've seen pictures at Real Madrid. I've seen pictures here, pictures there. But it seems that she's the go-to person. She's been doing it for years. She's extremely responsible. Bruce speaks the world of her. I can tell you that. Bruce knows that, he partnered up with her and she was able to make the arrangements. And no, so far so good on this trip. That's the way, that's the way it's been. That's the way it sounds. Spoke to a lot of people involved in this. Everybody's been happy. So it's pretty cool. I mean, again, if you have a good partner doing these type of things, along with the school, things are going to go a lot more smoothly. And the fact now that, she's kind of done it, she's been to Israel before, she told me, but this is the first time she did it with a school. So that, already gives X amount of experience, which is important. And I think that a school that would come next year will have an even better experience because they'll know, okay, you know what, we could have done these three things on one day. We could have cut out this on another day. Like, for example, they went to Yad Vashem, for example. That's the Holocaust Museum, which is a tremendous facility. Jay Billis spoke about it, I know, in the broadcast today. It's an amazing place. I've been to the real thing. I was in Poland, so I was in Auschwitz. I was in many of the different camps visiting many years ago. But it's the closest you're going to get, and also an educational facility for the players. That's obviously going to place that they're going to return to. Maybe they won't go to place X, but they'll go to place Y. Maybe they hooked up with a better hotel here and a better hotel there. Maybe they hooked up with a better bus place or, better restaurant, better place. I think there's, you learn when you do these trips.
You live and you learn. Yeah.
Yeah. But people have been having a good time. Everybody, I've been in touch with some of the people. They're saying it's great. There, you look at the videos, the players are having a blast.
Yeah.
I was with them for the training session they did with the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian children. I was there for that. The players love it. They're having a great time. They're having a blast.
You sent some great information to me earlier. We were all real worried on, I think it was Friday or Saturday, and we saw some stuff about airstrikes and different things. And without getting too political about it or anything, we were looking kind of like, what are the triggers, I guess, for Juventus, the soccer team was going to play a friendly against a team, and they canceled. We didn't cancel. We had the game anyways in Tel Aviv. Is there certain, maybe, sirens were going off Tel Aviv recently. We know things can be safe and everything, but is there some things, maybe some Twitter accounts that we could follow to be like, if this person says this is unsafe, that's, they're not going to play, or they're X,
So that's a good question you asked, actually. So, Juventus and Atletico Madrid had to fly into Israel. So they weren't here. So they looked at it saying, we're not going to take a chance and come. And I don't blame them. And I'll tell you why I don't blame them. Because at any moment in time, the home front command could say no public gatherings of 30,000 people in a stadium. I mean, and here they came to Israel and they're going to you're supposed to, play in front of 30,000 people, and they can't have the game. Now, today's game was in front of, family and friends, 150 people. Now, literally right before tip-off, there were sirens wailing in Tel Aviv. They launched an attack towards Tel Aviv, and they were all taken out by their Iron Dome. The game went on. I get, home front command, said, okay, obviously they said go ahead.
Is there a Twitter account or anything for home front command that we can keep up with?
So, I mean,
I know we can keep up with you. I'm sure you'll keep us,
Yeah, I mean, I try not to tweet too much stuff about it. I just don't want to get too political. Even my tweet about that there was Tel Aviv take cover, I had to get criticism from a Hapoel Jerusalem fan that I only talked about Tel Aviv. I didn't mention all the other places. But
I think most of our fan base is just so we're not there. We don't have a lot, and now all of a sudden we're being thrust into this kind of like our favorite team is dealing with this, what always seemed like such a far away concept, and we're trying to catch up a bit,
I'd say the IDF is always the best one to follow.
And then they do alerts.
Israel Defense. Okay. The Israel Defense Force is the English one. I believe it's at IDF. So there, I think is IDF or IDF Online. I think in English, that's really the best one to look at in general.
Great. Well, we'll check that, and we'll get people to follow you too for sure. I'm sure if things are getting canceled, you'll let people know too. It's just
the Hebrew website's the Hebrew Twitter's IDF Online. It looks like it's been, and there's also another one that has all the red alerts, but I'll save you from that. Well, there was 2 minutes ago, I see there was some action, 8 minutes ago. looking 30 minutes ago. Not in Tel Aviv, in the south, closer to the Gaza Strip. So
Well, we'll be crossing our fingers. We're really glad we got this game in too. And I did have one more question, not as much
sure.
sports related, but can be sports related. I grew up in Alabama. Matt grew up in Texas, but went to Auburn. I knew maybe one Jewish person growing up, and now I live in New York, and I know a ton of Jewish people. I made a ton of great Jewish friends and know a lot about different stuff. But for the people maybe in Alabama that don't know a ton of Jewish people, they might only know Bruce Pearl as the Jewish person. Are there any like Jewish cultures, foods, maybe celebrities, maybe sports players that people don't know are Jewish, or things they do in their everyday life that are maybe Jewish that these people that maybe have not met a ton of Jewish people can connect with,
So, I mean, Denny Avdia, and if you follow NBA, Denny Avdia is Jewish, of course, so you can follow him. Jock Peterson is Jewish, plays baseball. There's a number of baseball players out there today that are playing. There's not many NFL players. Mitchell Schwartz just retired. Boy, I'm trying to think. Hockey, there's a bunch. Jack Hughes, for example, is Jewish. But he's just one of Adam Fox for the New York Rangers is Jewish.
Okay.
So you have some definitely, high-end, NHL players and, players out there that are Jewish. Food-wise, falafel is always good. Shawarma is good. If your stomach can handle it.
Yeah.
There's some,
I feel like in America, Jewish culture is ingrained itself a good bit into society. I just wonder if there's anything out there we take for granted, that comes from this Jewish practice.
There definitely is, and I just can't off the top of my head. I can't think of, but I guarantee you that there definitely is. That's for sure. But it's listen, being Jewish is interesting. There's no question. We have a lot of rituals. I mean, you living in Williamsburg, you're in one of like the most religious areas of
I see him. I see everybody around. You were talking about Purim earlier, and Purim has got to be the wildest time to be in Williamsburg. All the cost, like, I don't know if this is, you can correct me if I'm wrong. From an outsider's point of view, Purim looks like Jewish Halloween. There's
right?
All these costumes of like kids running around, and they are like getting so excited to music and stuff. You'll like be walking around and look through a doorway, and there's like 20 teenagers like jumping up and down to some songs, and so it looks like a great time.
They're also drunk by that time as well.
Oh, so. Really? What's the go-to drink?
Single malt. A lot of people like.
All right.
Yeah, Scotch is they have some that like vodka. Variety of different things, but that's Purim's one of the big festive days, obviously, and it's a great holiday for kids. Bruce mentioned it again in that press conference, with the Ukraine and everything going on. So it's also as fun. It's also serious holiday as well. So, it's interesting. It's interesting to live in Israel. I wouldn't trade it in for anything. It's a lot of fun. People always ask me, and, so I don't know if it was Leo or one of the players asked me on the Maccabea team, like, what were the reasonings you made? You moved to Israel, you call it made Aliyah, which means to move up, or and people going up to the Holy Land, and why did you do it? Was there a lot of thought? And I said, I have a simple answer for you. It's just really, really simple. I said, and take it as you will. My belief is that the Jewish people should be in the land of Israel as a Zionist. That's my belief, and it's as simple as that. There's nothing, that was what was indoctrinated in us as children. That's what we believed in when we were growing up, and the minute we told our parents we're moving to Israel, they wanted to throw us out. they thought, my mother looked at me and said, "Are you crazy? Why would you want to do that?" I said, "What education did you give me over the last 20 something years?"
We didn't want you to take it that seriously, though.
Yeah, right. We didn't want to. Yeah, exactly. We didn't want to take it that seriously. But my in-laws would always celebrate when one of their friends' children would move to Israel. Because it was a big thing. And when it came to us, it was like, they weren't talking to us for a few months after that.
Oh, no.
So well, I don't know if they've ever, 18 years later, I don't know if they've ever gotten over it, but.
Have they come visited?
Yeah, of course. They're
okay, great. All right.
Yeah. They come usually, before COVID, they were here every year. So it's like, because they would come all the time. It was something we did. It was just as simple as that. That's the general belief that we believe as Jews, we should be in the land of Israel, settling the land of Israel. take it as you wish. People could rip me to pieces on it, but that's it.
No one in our fan base will, I don't think.
I don't think so.
Few.
Very few in your fan base will know that. So, but
Well.
it's really as simple as that. It's
Yeah,
just being
well,
as honest.
thanks.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say thank you for your time and your context. This has been really good for us, and I think our fans will really appreciate it. I want you to definitely mention your Twitter account, maybe your podcast, some things that where people can keep up with you even after. I think there's going to be some interest just in all this, just getting this lens there. So share that. And then my other question, I assume you've watched the 2 games so far with Auburn.
Yes.
If you were working as a scout on the taking this game tomorrow really seriously, and you've watched this Auburn team that has a bunch of new pieces too, what do you think? Who stood out, and who would you try to really slow down?
Listen, I'm happy you asked the question, Matt. You've been so quiet. I've been waiting for you. So,
This is life.
I was literally messaging Matt off to the side, like, sorry, I keep running you over, but this is so interesting to me. I couldn't help myself.
So, listen, I think you guys are all in for a culture shock tomorrow.
Yep.
You remember, you're playing against real pros at this point. You're playing against an NBA player. You're playing against players that play in top European competitions. You're playing against players that are veterans that have played in Israel for many, many years, and this is the top of the top. And they're not playing against really, I'd say, 4 of the players that will be on this final roster also. So there are, the final, actually 6, well, the 4 players that aren't dressing will be on the final roster that goes to the European Championships and the World Cup qualifiers. So taking that in mind, guys are gonna have a rough time. I mean, listen, Traore is not going to be able to do what he's done to these other 2 teams.
Well, let them know you said that.
Yeah. How much Israel scouted for this game, the national team? I don't think they scouted anything. I think that they're really looking at themselves and how they're playing. They need this game. They need to put 1 game under their belt. They have 2 games coming up Friday and Saturday in Georgia, not the state of Georgia, of course.
Oh,
but
to say we could have played a lot closer,
But the country of Georgia. Listen, Johnny Broom's had been really good. Chance has been terrific. I mean, you guys must be. I mean, if you look at the guys they brought in right now, you must be really happy. I mean, you're content, right? You've already punched your ticket to the Final 4, basically.
There we go. We're just worried about the Israeli national championship for now, but we'll get there. Yeah.
Katie Johnson. I mean, he took that. The guy sloppily landed on him. so but thankfully he was okay, and he came back at a good game. I think that also Bruce kind of held back a little bit some of his other players, right? I think he saved some of them for tomorrow's game. That's what it kind of looked like to me when I was watching it. But it's going to be a totally different situation. I think that the Israel national team, they have a few goals in mind for this game. One is they want to see their own players, how they are playing together as a team. And if they can execute what they've done over the past week of practice, because they've only just gone into camp around August 1st. And Denny only, arrived August 3rd or August 4th. So they want to practice some things that they, started working on in training sessions. Well, that's 1. 2, I'm sure he's going to want to see some of his defense, and I'm sure they will press at certain points. I think he's going to try a number of different defensive schemes. He could play zone at certain points. He could play a matchup zone as well. He'll play primarily, though, in Europe, you play 1-on-1. You don't play zone. But I believe just to keep the guys a little bit fresh, he'll probably play a little bit of zone. I think you're going to see a lot of standard plays that you'd see from a team that, again, hasn't played together in a while, though most of this national team did play together about a month ago. So it's not like these players don't know each other. A lot of them are very familiar. They know the coach. The coach has been a veteran in Israeli basketball for many years. He was once a star player himself, Guy Goodis. He won the league championship. So he's a happy man also at this point, because that was something that was missing from his closet with all of his trophies. So that I can guarantee you. But I think you're going to see Israel really focusing on Israel. And I think Auburn's going to just focus on Auburn. I don't think that Israel, I think maybe if one player starts to go off for Auburn, then you'll see Israel starting to hound that one player.
You'll see like the
And-
NBA guy moving in on him, or they'll pick.
Yes, well,
somebody,
I mean, Danny Avdia is one of the top defenders in the NBA. And he was in the top percentile for most of the season in all the defensive categories. So he is, he definitely will be, be a threat in that area. Yam Madar is a very good defender. He will dog people. He has endless energy. So you're going to see a lot of that as well. And there's some players on the Israel team that play no defense whatsoever. So I think that's what the coach wants to see, who's going to play defense, because that will see who is going to make the final cut or not. I can tell you tomorrow who's not going to make the team, and I can tell you tomorrow who's going to make the team. There's only maybe one, maximum two bubble spots. He'll take 14 players probably to the World Cup qualifiers and Europe and European Championship and not dress two. That's how it will probably work in case there's injuries, whatever it is. But pretty much we can figure out who those 14 players are, pretty much right now. And 4 of those players aren't dressed tomorrow. So, and that doesn't say anything bad about the players that are there. Niv Mizgov is tiny. He's a tiny point guard, but he's no smaller than, say, Wendell Green, right? And he's pretty small.
That's good. That we don't have a bigger guy to go up against, because that's always an issue. So.
Yeah, I'll tell you this: he can't jump like Wendell Green. I can guarantee you. But he can shoot the lights out on the ball. I mean, if he comes off a screen, you'll see a lot of screens. You'll see a lot of screens for the guards to take 3-pointers. I mean, that's what you would normally see with Tamir Blatt. Maybe you'd see less because he's not playing tomorrow. But that's a lot. That's a lot of what you would see. It would be very interesting to see if they played them tomorrow and then they played in 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I think the Auburn's going to be in for a tough time tomorrow. I don't think it's an impossible game, just because Israel's really focusing on Israel. I'd say in 2 weeks from now would be an impossible game. That's for sure. But that's fine. I mean, you have to. I think Bruce would be happy to lose a game, come back. Doesn't want his players to be too high going into the. Right? I mean, you don't want to. I'm sure he
gotta stay motivated. Yeah.
I don't think he wants his guys to come back. Yeah, we beat the Israel national team. We punched our ticket to the Final Four. I don't think he's interested in that. So it's going to be a tough game. I think the players know it. Bruce knows it. But it'll be fun. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, Josh, thanks for coming on. This was really cool. It was really cool to make this connection. So, and what do you say when you say goodbye in Israel?
You also say shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom is
Josh.
to say hi. Shalom is to say bye. And I'll just butt in with all my sports rabbi stuff, of course.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss out on free advertising here.
And we'll put it all on Twitter and everything too. Not that we're the best social media, but.
So at the Sports Rabbi, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, sportsrabbi.com for the latest and greatest news, both in English and in Hebrew. We are the only website to bring it to you in both languages. Check it out. If you go to sportsrabbi.com and you see all kinds of Hebrew, you see a nice English thing on the left side, just click that. You'll get into the English website right away. And there's all kinds of stuff there. Again, updated with all the quotes. If you're looking for from Danny Avdia and what's going to be for tomorrow, what the Israel national team's looking at is all there. Ready for you guys. There'll be probably an article up later, a little bit about the select team. I don't know how much I'll be writing about it. But if you want to, learn about Israeli basketball, it's all there. If you want to listen to some podcasts, great podcast with Roxy Bernstein from last week. If you want to get into Israeli soccer, where, a lot of our teams are in Champions League qualifiers right now and in Conference League qualifiers, you can learn about those teams, Maccabi Haifa, Maccabi Tel Aviv. So if you want to be a real Zionist and a love of Israel, the way of sports, and it's a lot of fun. I do this because I love it, and it's just a great way to connect with a lot of people throughout the world. So appreciate you guys having me on today.
Yeah, shalom. Thank you.
Shalom. Pleasure.